Watching the news in English is a great way to improve your English, but sometimes they use pretty difficult words. They'll use English phrasal verbs. They'll also use some English idioms. So today we are going to watch a small clip from a news story about Ukraine actually invading Russia. The opposite is happening. For most of the last couple of years, Russia has been invading Ukraine. Now the tables have turned. Sometimes we use that phrase when the opposite is happening. And as always, I am not going to give my opinion. I don't think that would be fair. I am going to do my best to just teach an English lesson. I am going to leave the politics out of this English lesson, but feel free to share your opinion in the comments section. But just please be respectful. My only opinion on this situation is I hope the killing can stop in this region as soon as possible. The clip is going to have the subtitles on the screen and it is going to be slowed down just a little bit so you can understand it better. Earlier, I put up a post to see which English lesson you would like to watch most, and Ukraine invades Russia 1. For each difficult thing that gets talked about in the news report, I will have a picture for you. I will also have a definition, and I will use that term in a sentence.
Russia fighting back after Ukraine's surprise advance. Ian Panel has the latest. Good morning to you, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, Robin. Another region of Russia declaring a state of emergency over Ukraine's audacious operation across the border.
I think the first difficult thing they talk about is state of emergency. Let's talk about what that is. A special situation where the government can take extra actions to keep people safe. Now, luckily, in the United States, we haven't had war here for a very long time, but we do sometimes have states of emergency. This will often happen when a natural disaster affects an area. Let's say a bad storm blows through an area. Do you know that English phrasal verb? If a town has been affected by this storm, they can declare a state of emergency and they might get more money from the government to help them repair. Let's take a look at a sentence that uses state of emergency. Ukraine declared a state of emergency to protect its people after Russia attacked. But of course, in the news story, the opposite happened. Russia actually declared a state of emergency. And we usually use that verb, declared. Audacious. This is a good term to know, a good term you might see on the IELTS or TOEFL exam. And it means very bold, surprising, often in a risky way. Like something bad might happen if you do something audacious. Ukraine made an audacious move by attacking Russian forces. For most of the war or the special operation, Ukraine has been on the defensive, we would say. They have been defending their territory. But by going into Russia, they're now on the offensive. They are the ones who are attacking. Some people might think that move is audacious.
Another region of Russia declaring a state of emergency over Ukraine's audacious operation across the border. Overnight, the governor of the border region of Belgorod calling the situation very difficult following attacks by Ukrainian forces, saying houses are destroyed, civilians dead and injured. Belgorod, of course, as you know, has been used to launch consistent deadly attacks on Ukraine.
You heard them talk about civilians. What are civilians? Those are people who are not soldiers or in the military. And unfortunately, in the picture, this is what civilians often look like. Children, women, people who are not soldiers. Let's use civilians in a sentence. Many civilians had to leave their homes because of the fighting between Ukraine and Russia. Consistent. In the picture, you can see consistency is the key. Consistency is the key to learning English. Let's talk about what consistent means. Always happening in the same way over time. It might take many years, but if you are consistent with your English learning, it will happen. Your English will get better. Ukraine has been consistent in its efforts to push back Russian forces. Please let me take a quick moment to ask you to like this video if it is improving your English, and also if you haven't subscribed yet. What are you waiting for? If you want to see more English lessons like this, please subscribe so you never miss another one.
Saying houses are destroyed, civilians dead and injured. Belgorod, of course, as you know, has been used to launch consistent deadly attacks on Ukraine. Russian troops seen captured and taken prisoner as Kyiv pounds the Russian border region of Kursk.
This is one thing that can make English so difficult, is that the reporter said pounds. But we use the word pounds in at least 3 different ways. So let's talk about 3 of them. You might hear pounds as a measurement. That is not how the reporter used it, but a measurement of weight in the US. We often talk about how much people weigh in pounds. I think we are the only country who does this. Most everyone else around the world uses kilograms, but here is a sentence using pounds as a weight of measurement. I gained 10 pounds over vacation. In the UK, you might hear pounds as money. They no longer use the euro in England, they use pounds. So it could be weight or it could be money. So let's use pounds as money in a sentence. The new phone cost £1,000. Now, this is the way the reporter used pounds as a verb, meaning to hit something repeatedly with force. In the picture, we have a woman pounding a punching bag. But here is an example sentence using pounds when it comes to the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army pounded the Russian base with rockets.
As Kyiv pounds the Russian border region of Kursk, which neighbours Belgorod, with missiles and drones, claiming control of almost 80 settlements. It's also struck 3 Russian airfields overnight, one more than 380 miles inside Russia itself.
In the news report, you heard them use settlements. So let's talk about what settlements are. Small communities or villages where people live. Russian troops attacked small settlements near the border.
Ukraine's shock counter-invasion, catching the Kremlin and Putin's army totally off guard.
Let's talk about counter invasion. Anytime you hear counter in English, think the opposite. So a counter invasion is an attack in response to an invasion, aiming to take back control. When we use the verb invasion, that means troops go over the border into another country. Russia invaded Ukraine first, so they could have a counter invasion where their soldiers cross the border and go into Russia. Right at the bottom, let's look at a sentence. Ukraine launched a counter invasion to regain the land taken by Russia. Invade is a verb that is often used in war, but it's not the only time we use invade. Animals could invade your house. That's the verb. The noun is invasion. You could have an invasion of ants inside your house. Let's use it in a sentence. You could have an invasion of ants inside your apartment. I hope that is not true for you, but I will take an invasion of ants in my house or apartment any day over soldiers invading my house. My heart truly goes out to anyone living in this region and having to deal with this war. I am so sorry. They talked about catching somebody off guard. Let's talk about what that means in English. To surprise someone who is not ready. And in the picture, I have two people who look like they have been caught off guard. Here's a sentence. Ukraine caught the Russian army off guard with a sudden attack.
Ukraine's shock counter-invasion catching the Kremlin and Putin's army totally off guard. Now they're trying to rush men, munitions into place to try and drive the Ukrainians out.
In the news report, you heard them talk about the verb rush, and that means to move quickly towards something. In this news story, they could have used it in a sentence like this. Ukrainian soldiers rushed to defend their positions from the Russian forces. But in normal everyday English, you might hear rush hour, which is the opposite of moving quickly. If you look at that picture, let me make it a little bigger for you. You can see a big city, and there are cars that aren't moving. During rush hour, you might be at a standstill in your car. It's another way to say you are not moving. It's hard to get around New York City during rush hour. And most of the time in large cities, you will have rush hour twice a day. Maybe at 9 a.m. when everyone is trying to get to work, and maybe again at 5 p.m. when everyone is trying to get home.
Ukraine's shock counter-invasion catching the Kremlin and Putin's army totally off guard. Now they're trying to rush men, munitions into place to try and drive the Ukrainians out.
You also heard munitions. Munitions. What are those? Military weapons, ammunition, and supply. We should probably talk about what ammunition is. It's just one kind of a munition. Ammunition is something like bullets or rockets that could be put into guns. Here is munitions used in a sentence. Ukraine received more munitions to fight against Russia. Let's get into a couple difficult phrasal verbs. Drive out. Now, you might know the verb drive. You could do it in a car, but drive out is a little different. It means to force someone to leave a place. If you think about those ants in your house, hopefully you can drive them out. You can get rid of them. Another phrasal verb. You can force them to leave. Maybe you use some kind of bug spray. But drive out, force out, they both mean the same thing. Let's look at the definition. To force someone to leave a place. Ukrainian forces are trying to drive out the Russian soldiers from their land. Russian soldiers. Not easy to say. They also used this phrasal verb, dig in. What does that mean? To prepare to defend a position for a long time. And remember, dig is an irregular verb, so the past tense is dug in. Soldiers might dig in to an area, and we might call those things trenches that they are in. Here's a sentence. The Russian army dug in, preparing for a long battle.
Now they're trying to rush men, munitions into place to try and drive the Ukrainians out. There is some sign of Ukrainian forces starting to dig in while others are trying to advance with fierce firefights reported. A senior Russian military officials now vowing to launch an all-out offensive to drive the Ukrainians out. But this has been a major blow to Putin and his war plan in Ukraine.
Oh boy. Here is a good adjective to know in English. Fierce. Fierce. If something is fierce, it's very strong or intense. Take a look at that animal in the picture. Looks like a wolf to me. I would not want to see this wolf in the woods if I was walking by. Looks pretty fierce. It looks like it could hurt me. There was fierce fighting between Ukraine and Russia near the border. You heard them say vowing. Let's talk about that verb. It means promising to do something strongly and seriously, like really seriously. In English, Maybe you can see those two people in the picture. It looks like they are getting married. During a marriage ceremony in English, most of the time the couple will give vows to each other. They'll have marriage vows. It's like a promise. You might hear them say to love you in good times and in bad. So let's take a look at a sentence using vowing. Ukraine's president is vowing to defend the country at all costs. It means no matter what, he is vowing to make sure the country is defended. Also, in English, we say President Zelensky for the Ukrainian president, probably different in Ukrainian, and we pronounce President Putin in English, the Russian president.
But this has been a major blow to Putin and his war plan in Ukraine. And I think two key questions. One, can Ukraine hold on to the territory, or can Vladimir Putin reassert control of his own backyard?
What is a major blow in English? Blow is a very difficult verb. There are a lot of English phrasal verbs that use blow, blow up, blow out. But a major blow is a little different. Let's talk about what it is. A serious and damaging event or action. The loss of territory was a major blow to Russia's control in the region. How about this sentence using major blow? Losing her job last week was a major blow. You can imagine when somebody loses their job and they didn't expect it. They could lose the money, they could lose their house, they could lose their car if they have it. It could be a major blow to someone if they lose their job. Here is maybe the most difficult one. Reassert control of his backyard. So they were talking about President Putin when they said this. Anytime you see re at the beginning of a word, think again. Let's say you tied your shoes in the morning before you left for work, but sometime during the day, they became untied. Well, you are going to have to retie them, meaning tie them again. Maybe you were reading a book in English, but it was a little confusing, so you have to reread it. You read it again. So reassert. I have a picture of that guy. It's the best I could do, but it looks like he's mad. So if you have to reassert something, you're probably going to be mad. If you assert something, it means you show like you have power. So let's look at the official definition. To regain control over an area close to one's own country. So at one time, you can imagine President Putin had a lot of control over the border of Russia. He's losing some of that control because Ukrainian soldiers are invading. To reassert control in your backyard, it's exactly like the definition says. It's like part of your own country. That's what they're saying for backyard. It's an idiom. So let's put it all together in this sentence. Vladimir Putin is trying to reassert control of his backyard by keeping influence over Ukraine. We ended on the most difficult one. I hope you have learned a lot of English. If you're looking for more English lessons, there's like over 2 hours of English lessons there for you. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.